Dr. Paul Corona, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you, Dr. Van Nuys. It's great to be here.
Okay, hey, you can call me David if I can call you Paul.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Okay, great. So we're going to be discussing your book, Healing the Mind and Body. And before we get into that, perhaps we can first touch on your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, in the South Bay area, and all up and down the South Bay. And then I went to USC for college in Los Angeles. And then I went after that to New York Medical College for 4 years to get my medical degree.
Uh-huh.
And then I came back to Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, for a 3-year residency program in family practice before I started private practice in 1992.
I grew up in LA myself a long time ago. So so that we have that in common. Your trip to New York, that was a long way to go to school.
It was, at the time I knew I was going to come back here and live and retire and all that. And so I just figured this was my only opportunity to live elsewhere. And so it ended up, I got into 6 medical schools. So it ended up being between Philadelphia and New York. And at the end, I just chose New York for the location, and it was a great experience. And I'm glad I got away. I think getting away from school is a great idea.
Yeah. Did you know that you were going to be a doctor when you were a kid? What did you?
About 5 years old or so, maybe.
Really, really.
I got a doctor bag for Christmas, and I was just enthralled by it. And
Oh yeah.
And so I took that everywhere. And so then I got the nickname Dr. Paul when I was a young child. And so I think it's really the only thing I've really wanted to do ever, I think, growing up. And I think there was really no other profession I thought of. And there was no good backup plan.
Okay. Well, how would we describe your psychiatric orientation? Would it be called holistic psychiatry?
That's what I call holistic. Excuse me. I call holistic because, I look at this as, trying to help the body heal itself. So my view about medications might be, people might think medications is not holistic. Well, I disagree, but I think if you understand what medications do, they really kind of work with the body to help it heal itself. And so that's why, excuse me, I'm very sorry. So that's why I look at it in that way. And and when I first started in training, see, when I chose a residency program, I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. So I chose family practice because I liked all different aspects of medicine during medical.
Sure.
And I didn't think I wanted to do psychiatric full time or pediatrics or what. So I decided psychiatry because of the fact that it was. I mean, I chose family practice because of the fact that I thought I could get the best of all worlds, and it was during the 90s really that I that really decided to go into psychiatry full time after I had a lot of experience in psychiatry. So anyway, so I getting into psychiatry for me was really, as a family doctor, I started to figure out that the physical and the emotional tied in together. Because when I started getting experience with prescribing psychotropics in the 90s, I started realizing that I was healing the body too. And so the title of my book, Healing the Mind and Body, came with the fact that I started seeing that treating psychological components also started to improve people's physical ailments. For example, a simple example, like stress causing headaches, stress causing joint pains and stomach problems and irritable bowel syndrome and fibromyalgia. So I started seeing this link between the physical and the emotional.
Sure.
And I started seeing this link is actually a neurochemical link.
Yeah. Well, it's all connected, right? We're, holistic. It's a whole system. And it's all about systems within systems within
Right.
systems, because also we're in an environment, and the environment also is part of the what's impacting our physical health and our mental health. Um, and actually, it's probably artificial to even distinguish between physical and mental, but that's part of our inheritance, I think. So would you say that you're working from a wellness model?
I am, and again, I think if I would not have started in primary care early on, I don't think these books would have ever come about, because it was my primary care background that gave me that more holistic look at a person, looking at all the elements of a person. And I think psychiatrists tend to look at the brain and the mind, and that they really ignore the body in a sense. And most primary care doctors like myself focus on the body and the physical, but ignore how the mind and how stress impacts the physical being. And so really what led to the books was this discovery that, when you reconnect the neurochemicals in the brain and body, great things happen. And so that's why I started to realize that I was seeing these miraculous things happening in my practice, when I was applying psychotropic medications in certain ways. And again, I think there's a lot of people out there who think medications are, that they're terrible. You can't go on medications. That's not holistic. Holistic is, wellness. And again, I'm not all about medications. With my patients, I also deal with their I send them psychologists such as yourself. I work with them about exercise. I work with them on breathing techniques. I work with them on coping strategies. And so I get to know my patients very, very well. And when I do, I really, I look at the person not just as a chemistry set that I can manipulate, but also a whole person and I get to know them. I get to know their families. I really dig deep inside, and once I know the person really well, then I can see really what's going to work for that person. As far as will medications, is that part of the answer? Maybe, maybe not. But I get to, I'll be able to figure that out once I work with the person.
How would you describe the current state of medicine?
I'm not happy with how it's gone. I think that, medicine's become very impersonal. I think it's become very corporate. I think we're seeing, like, I'm a kind of a dinosaur, in private solo practice. I think that mostly it's big groups, and people see different people constantly, and
Right. Yeah.
I think that lack of the personal connection. I think when people think about the old country doctor or the old family doctor, you think about someone who gets to know you. Like, that's what really got me into medicine. I really enjoy getting to know people and getting to know everything about them, and working with them. And I think the personal side, the customer service side, is really kind of dying in medicine, unfortunately. And I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction in medicine about what we do. And so I think there's a lot of unhappy doctors out there. I think it's a system that I think has gone the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. If you had a magic wand or had gotten some huge grant, let's say, uh, what would you do to change things?
Well, I think doctors need to, well, again, I think doctors need to learn the better way of doing things. This is why I finished my most recent book coming out. Is my goal is to teach, and I'm hoping with my teaching, I'm going to teach really not only about the medical part, but also how to be a doctor that caters to the needs of our patients. So since my first three books, Healing the Mind and Body, parts 1 through 3, my fourth and fifth book are which I've finished and I'm editing right now. They're basically training manuals for doctors. So my intention is to teach, not only the medical part, but also teach doctors how to, how to get more personal with your patients, and listen to them. I think
Yeah.
there's a problem that doctors just don't listen, and patients don't think they care.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly I've experienced that some myself. We're in a health plan, or and we've constantly. I'm concerned that Medicare is being undermined. And clearly there are forces at work that want to move us off of the Medicare that we that we would get at retirement, and get us into this other model where they're constantly sending us literature about, oh, well, you could save money if you and get these other things covered. But as I looked into it, my sense of it, and the way it's been explained to me, is you have to pay a whole lot up front that they don't tell you about. So you think this is going to save you a lot of money. Well, you're saving them money because you're forced to pay up front. And they're really basically trying to get rid of what I think is widely called Obamacare, which I think is wonderful. I don't want to see that go away.
Yeah. So, well, again, I think for Medicare for sure, but I mean, I think I think with Medicare, there's problems because I think it's starting to go a little bankrupt. And so, to save Medicare is going to be difficult. There's going to be some difficult financial decisions about that. But I think, old and young, I think that doctors can do better, and we need to we need to learn how to take care of our patients, and make sure we let them know that we care about them, and not
Amen.
and
Amen.
but the impersonal model that we have now, and I hear from all the time from patients that the doctor was barely even looking at me. He was typing in the computer the whole time I was talking. It didn't make any eye
Right.
contact. Gave me a prescription when I left and didn't even explain what it's for. Especially in what I do in psychiatry, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of just, here, you're in the room 5 minutes. Here's a prescription, and what I do with my patients is explain exactly, here's why I'm choosing this for you. I draw them diagrams of neurons. I say, okay, here's what this medication is doing, and I explain exactly why I'm choosing this, and also what I do is I have them call me about a week later and follow up and tell me how you're doing. And so there's
Wonderful.
a lot with me as customer service is so important. And the reason my success is so high is because of the fact that I listen to my patients. They're always able to get a hold of me. I follow up with them regularly, and get them better. And that's my goal, is to get every person I see in my office, get them well, mind, body, spirit.
Yeah. Now I know you've said that you see pharmaceuticals often as a useful tool. On the other hand, what's your take on the pharmacology industry generally?
I'm not a huge fan. uh, I think it's but I think the one good thing is that that they come out with some pretty amazing medications I get to work with. But also the pharmaceutical companies are very regulated by the government, so they have to do things in certain ways. But I'm not a huge fan of some of the stuff they do. I'm not a big fan of the FDA and how regulated things are, because I think that doctors don't really hear sometimes what medications are about, because they're so regulated, and the information, and with what I do with psychotropic medications, there's a lot of off-label benefits that we with them, and which means that benefits that can't be advertised, but that we find out. And but I think if the pharmaceutical companies are too regulated, then those messages don't get out to doctors about how to actually use these products.
Yeah. The the marketing is so intense, and doctors, unless they're careful, they can be kind of brainwashed to, okay, here's the latest thing. We're gonna send you off to Hawaii for you know and and we'll do that for free, and you can sit in on these seminars and blah blah blah, and so that's kind of distressing uh, to those of us who are consumers, uh, and uh, and there's a lot of confusion, I think, among patients these days, who to believe, who to trust.
Well, and
You
then
find,
there's a lot of TV commercials
oh
about
yeah,
the products, and I agree. I think that I think that part is getting better. I think they've kind of cut down on a lot of those golf trips and the trips out of the to Hawaii. I think that's gotten better. I think, but you're right. I think doctors get information from companies, and they're often skewed messages, and I think that doctors basically let the pharmaceutical reps tell them how they should practice medicine.
right, right.
And I
Speaking
kind
of
of
the FDA, I wonder what your take is on one of the things that's going on right now is, as I'm sure you're aware, strong interest in psychedelic psychotherapy, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that it's actually quite interesting. I'm not opposed. From what I've seen in some of my patients, that there has been some benefit for some people. I normally, I'm normally kind of aggressive with psychotropic medications, so most of my patients get well with what I do, and I combine medications together in certain ways. So I've learned how to really work with the psychotropics medications that we have. So many people don't even need to get to that level because of the fact that they're completely better with what I've done with the psychotropic medications, which again, what I call the healing, curative, and holistic medications. And I can go more into why I think that. Now, as far as I mean, you're about maybe talking about psilocybin, which we know as magic mushrooms. There's also ketamine now. There's also people would say like THC and the CBD. There's a lot of new things out, and the psilocybin, I think, it's interesting. It does seem to have value with certain people. I've had some cases that I've seen where I could only get the person so much better with medications, and then one guy in particular I saw recently, and psilocybin just completely turned things around. He's doing great. So I think there is value to just probably trying to identify who's the best candidate for those things would be the challenge. But I think for
Right.
my practice, it's basically when I've kind of done my thing, and I can't get the person completely well, was when I started thinking about alternatives like that.
Yeah. Actually, I have a son who is a nurse practitioner, and he actually benefited from ketamine infusion
Yeah.
that the medical system that he's in, I think it was Kaiser, and he had to go to a special Kaiser where they were doing this, and he had a problem with chronic pain, facial pain, due to, I think, a surgical problem or something, but he was horribly depressed as a result, and and he's normally sunny and loves people, and he's loved by everybody. And then he went into isolation. He wanted to isolate himself from people and all. So with a 24-hour infusion, and they didn't promote it as a psychedelic, but they just said, you might notice some psychedelic effects. Well, he just he just turned him around. It was amazing, and since then he's become trained to do psychedelic to assist in psychedelic psychotherapy.
Mhm.
So we have some enthusiasm for that approach in the family. But at the same time, though, I think that, in the studies, they are careful to screen people. And I think in the kind of medicine that you're practicing, you get to know your patients really well. So that in a sense, you're screening them. You will have a good basis for screening them, to make a recommendation one way or another.
Right. Yeah, but I've been pleasantly surprised at some of the outcomes. There's also called TMS is another alternative to medications that's become popular, which is, you sit in this machine and you have the
Yeah,
electrodes.
trans trans transcranial medical magnetic stimulation,
Right,
right?
exactly. So that's worked for some people, but yeah, I think the psychedelics, interesting that a lot of times it's with microdosing, and sometimes it's not the full-on psychedelic dosing. But
Yeah,
but if you have a therapist that's trained on that, it can be quite effective.
yeah. Now, one of the things that you talk about in your book, I think, is medical scams. Can you rhapsodize on that? What are some examples that you've encountered that concern you?
Medical scams.
Yeah.
Um,
There are things there are devices and treatments that are advertised on the internet, and they've got that advertising scheme down to a fairly well, where I know I got hooked on one that was for something or other, and uh, they said, in just 2 minutes, we will be able to show you blah blah.
right.
Half an hour later, I was still listening, waiting for the punchline.
Well, I think there's a lot. I mean, I think there's so much misinformation um, online. So I really caution patients, like, really be careful because what you see online, and maybe just be skeptical because these
Yeah,
quick and easy solutions and are often scams, and people want to sell products, and so sometimes they sell this supplement line. If you take these supplements, your depression will
right.
be cured, and so yeah, and it's the same thing. I say, just watch with advice you get from commercials. Um, Watch for the advice you get from pharmacists. Because I think pharmacists basically will sometimes talk people out of something that I'm giving them. They get to the pharmacy level, and the pharmacist will say, "Well, do you know what this is usually used for?" And so just basically destroying the trust that I
Oh,
have in the patient, and
yeah,
so I think there's a lot of chat rooms online. There's a lot of you know, and there's a lot of like really anti-medication mentality out there, and certain religions, but also just online. There's a lot of that, and so I always caution patients. And if a lot of my patients have anxiety disorders, I say, well, if you have anxiety, the worst thing you can do is read things online that are going to make you more anxious,
mm,
or going to the company website and reading, or going to even WebMD or some other credible sources for the most part. But sometimes what people read doesn't really apply to them, and so I'm, it's, so basically online just does not individualize the information that I think people need to hear, and they get confused, and then some of them get ripped off. And so I'm always telling people, and I often tell them that in the first visit. I should say, look, I'm not hiding anything from you, but I would just say I'd caution you about looking up what I'm giving you online, because you're gonna read a lot of scary things that don't apply to you, like side effects and
yeah,
and
yeah. That's happened to me. I've been I'm at the stage in life where I'm dealing with a bunch of medical issues. And so I've gone to WebMD and
yeah,
looked at the side effects and really get freaked out.
exactly.
And there are so many and they're so severe. And as you say, you don't know if that fits your particular case, but this can kill me. This can, you know,
Well, if you
Uh,
think about it, if you look at think about a commercial on TV, and everything these nice pictures and people are smiling and having fun,
oh
and
yeah,
then you listen to the litany of, okay, this could cause your arm to fall off, this could cause
right.
cardiac arrest, this could cause sudden death. I mean, so you hear some of this, and people like, wait a minute, did you hear what the commercial just said? I don't want to take
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
so. But I mean, why do they have that FDA regulations? They have to say those things. But
yeah,
there's a lot of like material, like I said, that online, that people have to just be really careful. I think the best source of information is talk to your doctor, talk to the person who's actually prescribing it, who's done it for a long time, like myself for 30 years. And look, I'll give you the skinny. I'll tell you exactly what the side effects to watch for. I'll tell you when you should stop it, when to call me. I like to individualize information and not get people, too much or overwhelmed with false information.
yeah, yeah. What about the biome? That's something there's been a lot in the press about the curative, about actually even the psychological states that are to some degree controlled by, by our gut, by our poop, and so on.
You said after what did you say at the beginning? You asked about what? You said Vion or
The biome.
biome?
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
oh, yeah. Well, I think the gut is the gut is very central, and gut health is gut health, everything, because everything connects to the nervous system. The nervous system goes to the gut, the heart and lungs, and so if things are off in your bowels, then it throws the system off. This is where maybe the term irritable bowel syndrome comes in. It's a kind of a term that kind of is a catch-all term, but it's extremely commonly related to stress. A lot of people have acid reflux and diarrhea and bloating, and so um, and so yeah, some of it might have to do with imbalances in their gut as far as overgrowth of certain bacteria. So some people might do well with a cleanse of some type, but yeah, the gut is very, very central when it comes to emotional and physical health.
yeah. So, how is a person? What are your recommendations for people who don't live in LA, but who want to find a doctor like you?
Well, I mean, they can get a hold of me. I'm doing a lot of virtual visits. Ever since COVID, I'm 90% of my visits now are virtual or by phone.
Oh, really?
And my books are available on my website. And so if they want to read more about what I do, or they read my books and the parts of my books and take those sections to their doctor and say, hey, can you do this? With this, um, like I said, I have another book. My next book, my sixth book, is actually coming out in January. So I'm hoping if that does well, then I can start. I'm going to start teaching, and so I'm hoping my grand goal would be to teach doctors my methods so that they can help their patients. But
Are there any organizations that you think tend to embody the kind of thinking that you bring to your work?
not that I'm aware of, unfortunately, which is why I've really had to kind of do this on my own. I've read psychiatric textbooks, I've looked through journals, and so the methods I use are, I've kind of learned a lot on my own. Um, I don't know if you've heard of. I don't know if I talked to you about my next book coming out. I don't know if did I give you the title of that or no?
Sure, sure. You can
Yeah, it's
feel.
called the Corona Protocol, a scientifically proven medical solution to stop addiction, bullying, homelessness, school shootings, and suicide. 30 years in the making. So that book is coming out in January, and it's basically, I tell 30 stories. It's mostly fiction, but I tell stories about patients, and so I'm hoping that book will lead to, I think it'll do very well, and I'm hoping that, the first thing I really want to do is teach, because I see that there's a huge need out there. And there's doctors need to be trained, and a lot of doctors out there. I think there's also primary care doctors really should be able to do the majority of this, what I do, because being a primary care doctor, I can easily kind of teach them. And there's a lot of nurse practitioners and physician assistants also that could be trained. So I think that's what I really want to do is train other providers to do the current protocol. And in the meantime, though, I mean, as far as patients, I mean, get a whole. I take new patients. I'm willing to work with people out of the areas. It's still totally fine and legal to do that now. Because of COVID, there's a lot of that's happening now. There's
Uh,
a lot of virtual distant care.
uh, how will people find you? What is your web address?
My web address is www.drpaulcoronamd.com. So that's DR for doctor. So DR Paul Corona MD.com.
.com. Okay, so we'll
And,
send people there.
there's a lot of stuff on there about me, my background, my training, my books, my blogs, all that. There's a lot of things on there.
Okay. Well, Dr. Paul Corona, I want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Wrap Radio. Sounds like you're coming from a good place, and encourage you to move ahead and do the training that you want to do to get the
Appreciate
word
that.
out there.
Thank you, Dr. Renez. I appreciate the opportunity to come on.